Driving down 2nd Street in Chaska, you may feel like you are in another time. In sight will be brick buildings, some over 160 years old, that have been ravaged by fire and invaded by flood waters yet are still standing. For its 2022 annual exhibit, the Chaska Historical Society will honor our first downtown district. Stories and photos will tell the tales of the shoemaker, a butcher, a TV repairman, the candy lady, the newspapermen of the Chaska Herald, and the buildings where they worked. In the 1850s and 1860s, there were no roads from Minneapolis to Chaska. The only road was the Minnesota River. It was the steamboats that brought needed supplies to Chaska and also new immigrants who came to claim their stake in the surrounding countryside. The very early years of the settlement of the town of Chaska saw only a few houses and one store, catering mainly to the steamboat traffic. This building is the oldest commercial structure in Chaska. George Faber arrived in Chaska in 1857, and by 1858 he had built this Chaska brick structure. It became a mercantile business, with the Faber and family living on the second floor. Dr. Hartley served the people of Chaska and Carver for half a century, weathering through epidemics of diphtheria and typhoid fever. His name has faded from memory over the decades, but his 50 years as Chaska's physician has earned him the title of beloved old family doctor. This tiny building, only 18 feet by 24 feet, was one of the first banks in Chaska and was erected in 1876. It was built by George A. DuToit and his partners and would become Carver County State Bank. It was a pre-TV repair starting in 1958 and remained so for 30 years. Back in the days when if you had a problem with your TV, a TV repairman would come to your house and fix it. The Diedrich Building began its life as another hardware store built by Philip Henk in 1872. On the second floor were various clubs like Masons and BFW. Most of its life, over 70 years, it was a tavern and bar owned by the Diedrich family. 3 Astrick brothers were Masons, and one of them, Ewald, decided to go into the hardware business and built this beautifully decorated building in 1903. It remained a hardware store for most of its history. This mannequin is sporting the men's clothing style of the 1800s. Men's shirts were pullovers with only 5 buttons. Trousers during this time were very high-waisted, so high that a belt could not be used, hence the use of suspenders to hold up the pants. Fires, floods, and tornadoes have all struck 2nd Street. The floods hit the lower and eastern side of the business areas almost each spring. Fire destroyed half of the north side of West 2nd, and another time Guardian Angels Church almost burnt to the ground. A large tornado blew through in 1925, destroying the west wall of Guardian Angels School. Like all stores on 2nd Street, this building has had many different businesses under its roof. This photo shows Lambert Weller beside his hearse in front of West 2nd Street Funeral Parlor. Mr. Weller ran a combination funeral home, furniture store, floral, and vacuum sales business. The photo is circa 1915. Nellie Baxter was a rarity in her time, a woman who owned her own business. She had a grocery store on West 2nd, Baxter Grocery, and was popular with the children in her town for her large candy counter and ice cream parlor. She kept 2 easy chairs in her store so folks could come in and read the funnies from the Sunday paper. She ran her grocery for almost 50 years. Before the days of radio or TV, the general stores on 2nd Street became the hub of the town. Customers came in for needed supplies, but lingered to hear the local gossip, the news of the world. It was a place to meet up with old friends, for men to discuss farming and repairs, and for women to tell tales of birthing and childbearing. The general store provided a warm wood stove and empty kegs where customers would sit, tell stories, and gossip. A spittoon was always in close range for tobacco chewers. Some general stores kept checkerboards so customers could amuse themselves with a friendly game. Women's clothing styles of the early 1900s has discarded the hoop skirt and the bustle. The narrow dress and skirts reflected a narrower profile and a design made for easier walking about. The hems of skirts and dresses, circa 1906, rose above 6 inches above the ankle, mostly to decrease the uncleanliness of hems dragging on the floor. One of the smallest buildings on 2nd Street, we don't know the exact date it was built, but it was a saloon in the late 1800s and a shoe repair in the early 1900s. It was L. Glatzel's purchase of the building that would last for 50 years. He bought this building, 113 West 2nd Street, in 1928 and remained the town's shoemaker until 1978. The Chaska Herald building has been the home of the local newspaper since 1872. There is no other newspaper in the state that has been housed in the same building as long as the Herald. The Gell building was the home of a longtime Chaska butcher, Charlie Gell. Charlie's first shop was a wood frame structure that burned to the ground in 1900. The brick building was constructed within the same year. The butcher shop was on the first floor, and the Gell family lived above on the second floor. The glass block was a two-story structure with large windows on the front and side of the store. Built in 1904, it sold a variety of items. For the time, it was an amazing store and brought in people from all over the county. The Middlestead Motor Service Company began around 1917 on the south side of 2nd Street. 2 gas pumps offered gasoline to the community as well. There were other dealerships and garages on this street from the 1920s into, and it was a lively, heavily populated part of Chaska for a couple of decades. Guardian Angels Catholic Church was built in 1885. It was the third church to be built. The other Catholic churches had been built around 1859 and 1870 when the populations in Chaska were smaller. The Catholic residents tended to buy houses near the church, and the west side of the town became the Catholic side. The clock on the church tower, with bells ringing every hour and every 15 minutes, became the main timepiece for the town, in a time when few people had watches. For decades, 2nd Street was Chaska's downtown. It's true that the business area has moved on to newer locations, but Chaska is lucky to see its original downtown still standing. 2nd Street was the route that allowed the branching out of Chaska's dynamic commercial growth.